and I'm excited to welcome some exciting partners that we're working with. If you don't already know me, my name is Clara, and I run Ask a Chief of Staff. We are the premier go-to community and platform for current and aspiring chiefs of staff. We like to support this role through programming, webinars, mentorship, workshops like this one. So if you haven't heard of us already, please take a look at our website at askachiefofstaff.com, and we would love to support you in your chief of staff journey. With me on stage today, we have some really exciting guests from Miro. I'd love a show of hands. How many of you have heard of Miro? Have you used Miro in the past? Feel free to give us a wave so that we know who's already a Miro user. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of hands going up, which is amazing. Always happy to see that. So we have two very special guests with us today. First and foremost, we have Lotte, who is our chief of staff at Miro. She is going to be sharing a lot about what it is that she does, OKRs in action, how Miro uses Miro in their planning process, which is really exciting. And so I'm excited for her to share her experiences, her journey as a chief of staff, and how they are planning. And we also have Iman here with us today, who is going to be leading the demo portion of our project, of our workshop. So excited to have both of them here to share their experiences and help us with the OKR process and how Miro is using Miro in their planning process. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass the mic over to Lotte. Everybody, huge warm round of applause for our two guests here with us today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Clara, for the introduction, and thank you so much for having us today. Great to see such a big turnout from so many different places. Awesome how we can all easily come together this way. Before we get into it, and before I share a bit more about myself, let me just take over. There we go. How we'll be spending the next hour together. I'll tell you a little bit more about my journey as a chief of staff, what I'm responsible for. Would love to hear a little bit more also for those amongst you that currently already are chief of staffs, what you're responsible for in your day-to-day work. And then I will share a bit more about how we actually do OKR planning at Miro, the process, the journey we've been on as a company, also coming from a small startup, obviously, to the company that we are today. And then Imi will actually show practically how we do some of our OKR planning. She'll show some of the templates of the blueprints that we use as well. And then finally, we'll try to keep the last 15 minutes for an AMA session. But obviously, if you have any questions throughout, please let me know. Come off mute or raise a hand. I think just coming off mute might work. And let us know, because I would love for it to be more interactive than me and Imi just talking at you for the next 50 minutes. All right, a little bit more about myself. I think it's easy to always start with the work history, but outside of that, I actually love to travel, and I'm a certified yoga teacher as well. I don't teach outside of work, but it's a great way to stay sane, combining all the different things that come to you as a chief of staff. I started my career off in strategy consulting at BCG, joined them straight out of university back in 2014 in Amsterdam, and also spent 3 years in New York along the way, where I did my MBA at Columbia and also worked for the BCG office there. Around that time, coming from like a really generalist start, I started specializing in people and organization, as they call it there. So it was a functional specialization focusing on large-scale transformations, reorganizations, org design, operating model design, and all of those good things that actually make a company work and make a company function. At the time, agile at scale transformations were also really a big thing, which actually was the first way I started to get in touch with tech. So when I started looking outside of consulting 3 years ago, I actually landed at Miro in tech, and all that experience came in very handy. From leading those projects and those transformations, I really actually wanted to see the journey through for a longer time at one company, which is why I ended up joining Miro. Was familiar myself with the tool already as well, working in consulting, and excited about it. So was really happy with the opportunity I got here 3.5 years ago. I started off as a strategic program manager. At the time, we had a small team of strategic program managers that led large cross-functional programs across the company, really focused on internal programs at the time, also operating model related, worked a lot together with the people team as well. And now, since it's August, 2 years already again, I'm Chief of Staff to the CEO here at Miro, which is, I think a lot of these people on the call here might have a better image of it, but usually when I tell people I'm a Chief of Staff, they go, sorry, what is your job? Are you in HR? Do all the people report to you? So actually, this webinar was a good occasion to all put it once on paper. Me and Imi had a good laugh about it, that we could actually use this a lot more often going forward as people asked us what me and my team are actually responsible for. So it's a few different aspects coming together. I really like the phrasing, the glue that holds the leadership team together. I think we probably have to thank AI for that one. But more practically, what it basically means is on a yearly basis, I lead the strategy and planning process. So it's really the strategic artifacts that we're about to talk about, OKRs, setting those goals fully across the company. I do it together with the CFO and our head of strategy and finance, where we obviously set not only the OKRs, but also the budget and the resourcing goals. Then thereafter, obviously we have to track the OKRs throughout the year. So I lead that process as well and basically set up the system to track those OKRs. And then in that process, I work closely together with the leadership team and with our top 60, 70 leadership team. So that is our extended leadership team, which you'll hear us refer to more often as well later on when we talk about the OKR tracking process. So I work closely together with those teams in these processes, but overall, I also run, obviously on a weekly basis, or executive leadership team meetings, as well as on a monthly basis, more or less, we have meetings with that extended leadership team as well to ensure that the information cascades well, and that they also have all the key context they need in order to be able to execute the plans effectively. We have a top 60 leadership program, but probably good context for that is Miro right now has about 1,600 employees. So that's why we also feel like there's the need at this point in time for the size of the company to have a forum like that. Then I'm also responsible for ways of working. So there's someone else in my team who's not on the call today who basically leads that function. So it's really the way we execute on projects and the way we execute on programs and the way we work at Miro, creating a common language around it and actually just all making us work better together across the company. And then finally, I also lead complex cross-functional programs. So it's more ad hoc. What are the large programs that are running right now? What are the key business priorities that I then also program manage next to running these processes. I hope you are all able to join us on the board in the meantime. Chief of Staff means a lot of different things in a lot of different places. So if you're able to join me, I see a bunch of people are already on the board. Would love for you to actually drop your face anywhere on these trackers to get a bit of a feeling for what everyone's responsibilities are as a Chief of Staff to see where the differences are. So as people jump on the board with us and drop their faces on it, does anyone want to share big differences that they see, or is it very aligned? See a lot of folks dropping on. Okay, so we see some mixed responsibilities on strategy and planning. Everyone seems to be responsible for execution and traction of different programs. Leadership enablement, a bit more mixed. Ways of working, it obviously often can also be a different function that could also sit with the COO or with HR. So it makes sense that's a lot more divided, and cross-functional programs we see as well. Awesome, great. All right, anything anyone wants to share, or should we just get into the good stuff of strategy and planning? All right. Awesome to see. Let's keep going then. All right. OKR Planning Traction. Usually when you ask people, how do we feel about OKR Planning Traction? There's a few folks that say, I got it. It's okay. It's fine. It's easy. I can handle it. I have this. However, to be honest, most people that I meet give more like this type of response when you talk about strategy and planning or OKRs. I haven't met many people yet that can relate to the first Giphy. I think this is more the overall response. Um, and you might wonder, right? Because it's goal setting, it actually sets the strategy for the company, it sets a strategic direction, and it should actually provide a lot of clarity for employees. So you wonder, why is that? How do we got there? Why is it so difficult and why is it so complicated? And why do a lot of us struggle so much with it on a daily basis? Or why does the process actually feel so painful? Even though I think oftentimes we're quite pleased with the outcomes once we have our goals defined and we actually are able to provide that clarity to our company and to all of our teams so we can drive in the same direction. I think one of the key things where it often goes wrong is actually we put the framework or we put the tool that we're doing the work on at the center of the work that we do. So we try to force fit the work into the tool, into the framework, which actually therefore results, we work in a tool-centric way, we put the work around it, and then we see the people on the periphery of it. So what that leads to is usually a tooling landscape that looks like this. When you start off your strategy and planning, you have brainstorming sessions, which you do in some visual collaboration tool, which might be Miro. Then later on, you get into the execution, and then the marketing team prefers to use Asana, whereas actually the product teams are, if you're working in a tech company, probably groom their backlogs in Jira. And usually this proliferation of tools and different processes actually make it very difficult to work together. Because I think if in practice we look at what strategy and planning looks like, or actually what the development of any project or program looks like, is it's a fluid process, right? So if we think about OKR planning, first you define the objective, you discover what are the priorities for the company, what are the direction we want to head in, what is important for this year, which leads you to defining your objective. Then if we think about the key result, you don't even get through delivery yet, right? But you go back to discovery. How can we actually measure this? How can we make this measurable? So then you have your objective and then you have your KR. Then you start thinking about what is the work we need to drive to actually move the needles on these OKRs. So then you start thinking about your initiatives, which again, you start to think about what do the initiatives look like, which is a discovery phase. And once it starts to get more concrete, you get into your definition phase. And then finally, throughout, you deliver on your initiatives. But again, there also on a quarterly basis, you probably take a step back, look at your progress, and you continue to discover, define, and deliver. Obviously, on a conceptual level, all sounds great, but the proof is in the pudding. So how do we actually do it at Miro? Strategy and planning, and more specifically, also the setting of our OKRs. Also for us, it's been a journey. And that journey started long before I joined Miro. So we dug up some good old pictures here from when Miro actually started about 14 years ago. So you see a picture of the small team that once started it. And quite a few of the people are actually still around in the company. Started in a garage. Then we had a smaller team in the office. And finally, you see actually a picture of Miro, of everyone coming to Amsterdam last February, of the size of the company that we are today. And I think we really developed our way towards OKRs, but also a bit the theory behind it. Because I think one difference you really see, and I saw in the chat, we have people here from all different sizes of companies. And I think you usually see two types of schools of thoughts on OKRs. You have the one school of thought that actually says, the OKRs are all the work that we do in the company. So it captures and your bigger change initiatives, but it also just captures your business as usual work. So this usually works for smaller size companies quite well. So you could even like cascade the OKRs, set up a full driver tree, and everything basically ties back to the company objectives and KRs. That's also when I started strategy and planning at Miro about 3 years ago. That's actually how we did it back then. So all the work of the whole company rolled up to the company level objectives and OKRs, but it led obviously to the OKRs being a bit more general, to make sure we were able to cover all the work in the business that was being done. Throughout time, given the size of our company, we changed our philosophy on it a bit. So actually how we do it nowadays is our OKRs capture the large change initiatives that we drive at the company. So we think about overall business metrics that we discuss in the leadership team on a weekly basis, which for, again, as we are a tech company, are things like what is our ARR, what are our revenue numbers, what is our pipeline looking like, what is our gross revenue retention number looking like, and what is our adoption number looking like, and how are our product teams doing in general on delivery. So that's really for us tracking that business health and moving the metrics on an overall business level. Then our OKRs actually reflect the few large change initiatives that need to happen. So those are the biggest, most complex cross-functional programs. So for example, do we want to focus more on a specific persona? And how do we set up a cross-functional team for it, right? What are the capabilities we need in a product to be able to do that is what our product team is responsible for. Then how do we market those? It's where our product marketing team comes in. How does it fit with the narrative of our full company, where the rest of the marketeers come in? And then how do we eventually bring it to market, and which segments does this positioning for this persona fits? Is where our go-to-market enablement team, and then obviously in the end also the sellers come in. So nowadays our OKRs really focus on the large change initiatives. Would love to hear from anyone on the call. Does that resonate? How does it work for you? Do you live by one of the schools of thoughts? Did you end up stuck in the middle? Because I have to say we've been there a little bit for a while as well.
I don't mind speaking if
Great.
because my case is interesting because we're only at our third quarter of OKRs.
Yeah.
I'm in a company that's currently maybe 30, 35 people. And we've actually done both because we started with option one and we're slowly sliding to option two because in the middle we got stuck with 72 key results, which is quite impressive for a 30-something people company. Because I think we were just trying to cover everything and didn't make them general enough. So I think what resonates for me is looking at what could be the health metrics that could be sort of taken out of that, that could help people feel like they are contributing to some kind of metric, but also focus on like the things that are important and reduce the burden because reporting on 72 KRs was not fun.
I can imagine it actually ended up being an exercise of mapping all the metrics of the company that potentially could be driven. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Lauren. That makes a lot of sense and I think resonates as well. I see a question from Seema in the chat. When we actually made the switch between the two options, what changes triggered this? I think it's honestly size is an important factor there because like the level of it being generic, but I think we also just realized that it was really difficult to move the needle at that level if we mapped all the work in the whole company and then kept the objectives really general. I think was one of the things we started running into. And then I think more importantly, it was difficult to actually get those big cross-functional change initiatives done. And we looked for a way to become more successful in driving that change in the company and driving those large cross-functional projects. Because I think one of the things is when um, uh, one of my first projects was actually we also looked into, right? We just went to hyper growth. Why does it become more and more difficult to just get work done at Miro? And coming out of hyper growth, it's really not weird to actually be in that stage as a company. So one of the things that also came out of it was establishing our ways of working to just make sure actually those baseline operations that someone is asking about in the chat also were working well. And then at the same time, also making sure that our change muscle and our transformation muscle started to work better. I agree indeed, Katja, that moving from 1 to 2 requires establishing scalable basic business operations indeed. Casey?
Hi, good morning. I just had a question. When you're talking about building OKRs for the company, I guess when I've done it, I've made like for a department, let's say, like broader OKRs, and then each specific function had their own OKRs that laddered back up into the overarching company's OKRs. Is that different than what you're talking about, or the same? Like,
It's
because I don't know, the way that I'm
yeah.
here, the way that we're talking about it right now makes me feel like there's just like one blanket like objective, and then there's a bunch of key results, and all of the different departments would then like funnel into what their KRs are. And I guess I've seen it as like a ladder step work where it's like, okay, here's broad overarching OKRs for the company. Now let's have each department head create their own OKRs, and the KRs of that people or of those departments are in service of and help contribute to the broader company's objectives and key results.
Yes, okay. So we've done exactly what you said in the past as well, establishing the OKRs on a functional level. However, what that really led to for us was silos of work for each of the functions. Because I think, and it's probably largely due to company size as well at the time where we did it, because then basically in isolation, each function defines their objectives and KRs, which then led to everyone working in parallel. So basically where we are at now is we have a number of specific OKRs focused on the change work, and a lot of the projects and initiatives that teams are doing that are all interconnected and highly cross-functional ladder up to those OKRs. And then there's some functional work in each of the functions that actually doesn't directly line up to the company OKRs, but it's more considered business as usual. So they don't cover all the work anymore. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense.
Okay. All right. Let me keep going, keeping an eye on the time. So in terms of artifacts, what it practically looks like, right? Because I think what we often also see is with lack of a good strategy, actually the process of defining the OKRs becomes the process of defining the strategy. So basically, we have 3 types of pillars, artifacts, how you want to call it, how we have it at Miro. We basically have outlined our 3-year vision, which we often also refer to as our painted picture, which shows where do we want to go? What's that North Star? Who do we want to be in 3 years? Obviously, especially nowadays, looking 3 years into the future is difficult to make it very precise. So it's a bit more on a vaguer level. Then in order to get there, we define what is our 1-year strategic plan. So what are basically the stepping stones for this year, those strategic priorities that we want to drive, so those big change initiatives, in order to get to that 3-year vision. That's basically the wrapper around our OKRs, right? What are those strategic priorities that basically set the tone and the context for what are our objectives and what are our key results, and what are those initiatives, large cross-functional initiatives we want to drive underneath those. And then on a quarterly basis, we basically review our OKRs and we course correct wherever is needed, which usually means we don't change the objectives or the KRs, but at times we change the initiatives under it that actually drive that work. In terms of practical examples, Imi is actually gonna show some of them in the demo shortly. So for now, I'll keep going to make sure we have enough time for that as well. Throughout this process of defining those OKRs, we actually apply the W model. So you actually see the W model or the M model. We didn't draw the lines between the boxes here, but I think everyone can imagine them based on how they are stacked on this slide. Excuse me. So it basically means top down, the executive leadership team sets the strategic direction first and basically defines those priorities for the year. Then at the same time, we bottom up validate those priorities to make sure we really capture the key things. And obviously, an executive leadership team doesn't know everything. So we validated bottom up, which then means we integrate and refine it again top down. We make edits, we make sure everyone's aligned. Then again, that aligned version obviously has iterated, has further developed, which we then bring back to bottom up we bring it back to the teams doing the work, and then we come to final alignment and rolling it out. So it basically brings together a top-down model and a bottom-up model throughout our strategy and planning process. Sounds great in theory. How do we then actually do it? So actually, this slide should answer your question, Juan, because this is what the process looks like over the next few months. So our financial year starts in February. So that's why we are rolling out the plans only in January. So this is actually about to happen again in about a month. In September, we have our strategy offsite with the leadership team, where we set our strategic direction, we discuss our financial plans, we discuss a first version of our targets, and we have initial thinking on the priorities, which sometimes also leads to some draft objectives. But again, right, it's like the leadership team is like 9 people in a room. They don't know everything. They need the input from their teams. Then over the next month, basically the executive leadership team works with their teams in order to further iterate on those objectives and KRs, to refine the measurements, to do the analysis behind it that is required to get more certainty in those plans. Then we come together with our whole executive leadership team and our extended leadership team. So we basically meet for 3-4 days with 60 people, where we have a balance between sharing a bit more on that strategic direction, working groups for those specific objectives and KR, sharing the work that they have done, and with some cross-functional working time as well, which should get us to a good version by the end of that offsite. And then usually we need like another 2-3 weeks after it to wrap up open ends. Then at the same time, we actually run our business and financial planning process. So that's the budget, it's the targets, as well as our headcount planning, which then comes together in December for final functional financial planning reviews, because of course the resources and the budgets need to align against those goals we've set in the OKRs to make sure we can make them happen. And then in January, we will roll it out for the whole company. So we do the big strategy presentations, present the OKRs, and basically the priorities, which then also thereafter is translated to the functions. But again, as you've just seen in the W model, it's not like the most junior folks in the company don't hear anything until January, and then it's like, ta-da. They are taking along on the journey in the process. The process is quite stretched out at Miro, I have to say. It's quite a few months, but it's also really, we spent a few hours a week on it, versus sometimes you see other companies do it like in a shorter sprint, in a way more condensed time span. However, for us, we also have our big launch moment in October on a yearly basis. So there's a lot of stuff happening at the same time, which actually also leads it to a longer stretch process. What would the timeline look like for an early stage company? And are all the steps still relevant? I think for early stage, I would definitely not think about your 3-year vision, but a little bit of a North Star, I think, should be good enough there. And then the question is, what is actually a good time frame for you to plan on, right? Would it be on a quarterly basis? Maybe it's more of a half-year basis, and then you review, and then maybe you do a bit of a bigger motion on a yearly basis, but it's actually quite a lot of work for every 6 months as well. I think more than 6 months is probably honestly a stretch, because even in practice for us, those actual plans, the initiatives to drive the KRs, they're more detailed on a 6-month basis. And then it's like for H2, we have these things in mind, but we refine it as we go. So then throughout the year, it becomes a little bit more of a rolling planning. Any more questions on this? All right. The fun thing of doing this at Miro is that we do it on Miro, which actually allows us to dog food our own product, or the nicer way to say it, to drink our own champagne. So actually we do, of course, all those collaborative brainstorming sessions, we do them on Miro, but we also do our end-to-end execution. We run our projects, we run our programs, you see, we do our presentations, we do all of it on Miro, which is actually a lot of fun. I was building out a tracker earlier today, but then I'm actually doing it together with a few product folks because it allows us to try out the latest features and to actually test how those things work for other companies as well. So for us, it's really a way to also actually fuel our own product innovation, which makes it a lot more fun. And of course, we can use our latest AI features that Imi will also show you a bit more about in a minute. Which actually brings us to how you would want to be running OKR processes, right? We often also talk at Miro about, okay, we stick it in the OKR framework, but what's the overbeer explanation of our actual company priorities? And I think the key is, as a leadership team, is getting those clear first before you can actually translate it into the work, or before you can actually put it in the tools you need to put it in to execute on it. So I think that's where we can get to today already. And obviously, you can only imagine at the pace we will be able to do it, and we will be able to execute, and the innovation we will be able to drive once we also have agents giving us a hand here. Last question. Yeah, it's I can very much relate, Stephanie. We actually kicked off strategy and planning yesterday with our executive team. And we explicitly put the statement on the board. So we have one new exec since the we have one new exec since our last strategy and planning process. And we literally just honestly put a sticky on the board. We first discussed the approach for strategy and planning. So we literally discussed what is the process going to look like. And we literally said, do we all agree we're going to be using OKRs? Because I don't want to have the conversation halfway through the planning cycle, which usually happens at some point, where someone starts questioning if OKRs are the right framework. So I think it's really key actually on getting buy-in on your approach early on, to make sure it doesn't come up later in the discussion. But again, obviously, at the moments where it gets rough and the heated content discussions take place, people still often like to ask the question if OKRs are actually the framework we should be doing it with. All right.
Nice.
Go ahead, Imi.
Yeah, then I think we come to the demo part. I think Juan had one more question.
Yeah, sorry, it's just a question that how do you do regular check-ins as the year actually progress and month per month things happen? And I believe in this large organization, many things are actually happening at the same time. And how do you balance also the bureaucracy or work for presentations and reports versus actually doing the work?
It's a very good question. I think it's something we've been iterating on a lot. 2 years ago, we had an airtight system with all the projects of the whole company rolling up into the OKRs and built basically where everyone did their weekly updates. I think we lasted about 4 months in that system, and then everyone hated it so much that the meetings didn't take place anymore. I think now we found a better balance where we actually do it on a monthly basis and we do it deeper on a quarterly basis. But actually, on a monthly basis, we stay away from like death by analysis. And we actually have the conversation of like, okay, did the number move? What is the work we have done in order to move the number? And do we think we need to do anything different for what's the focus for the next month is actually what we do on a monthly basis. Then on a quarterly basis, we take a larger step back and say, hey, in the past quarter, to what extent have we moved the needle? What's the work we've been doing? Do we need to do anything else to set up the work better for success? And any changes we want to make for the next quarter.
Okay. And just final follow-up question. In a really dynamic year, have you evaluated doing this process twice or just a shorter version that things might actually really change?
I have to admit, in the past years, we usually killed one objective about halfway through the year. We had 4, and we usually ended the year with 3, and at times even 2. So the first quarter, usually not that many iterations, right? But on that first half of the year to the second half of the year point, often some edits are made, and it just creates more focus.
Great, thanks.
Right.
Nice.
Amy.
Yeah. Then, yeah, welcome everyone to the demo part of today's session. I'm really excited to guide you through our blueprint and basically just kind of explain you what is a blueprint actually at all. Because, yeah, if you have, for instance, never used Miro, then I think this might be very new to you. So basically, yeah, first I show you the blueprints, guide you a bit through it. In essence, it's just a kind of template that, yeah, helps you move from, we would say, the strategy chaos to a clear, actionable goal in the end, because that's what we kind of want with OKR planning. Then we spend some time on a specific part of the planning process, which Lotte already mentioned, right? Like how do we actually get to the strategy brief, which is kind of the foundation then for, yeah, the OKRs, so to say, around it. And then I would also like to showcase you a few features and tools on the board. But before that, I quickly want to introduce myself. So my name is Iman. I'm originally from Germany, strategy and operations lead here at Miro, and I'm basically part of Lotte's team. And yeah, actually primarily support her on OKR planning and traction. So also just joined Miro recently. And traction has been basically the first big chunk of my last quarter. Before that, I was also in the consulting world within a corporate venture builder or venture studio, and joined 2 different startups. So also really like kind of the balance of strategy and execution. Nice. So as I mentioned, I want to show you the blueprint, and this blueprint is also hopefully a bit more useful for the target group. We asked Clara before the meeting, hey, like who are the folks, right? Like who's coming? And we know that most of you guys are from like smaller companies. That's also why we focus on this kind of blueprint. What is a blueprint? This is how it looks. You always find like a short description about it. And just to figure out, hey, can this help me, or do I maybe have to go back and browse again? Here on top, you also find the different boards and sections. So you can think of a blueprint literally as a kind of folder structure where you find different sections, which you find here in light gray. So how to guide, strategy and context. And then basically the different sections contain different boards with templates that you can use. There are like all different formats, from tables to docs to like interactive workshops. Exactly. And maybe just if this is not familiar to you, how can I kind of like find these blueprints here? If you click on explore templates, then you see this is our blueprint library, and we have basically different blueprints listed here, always with a name, and then you can check them basically out and see if they are fitting what you want to do. So let me guide you briefly through the strategy and goal setting one. So as I mentioned, you can find the structure here on the left-hand side. And this one is basically built out of 3 big sections: strategy and context, then objective and key results, and then basically the final goals that contains the final OKRs and the goal presentation itself. Just to give you maybe a few insights into how they look. Here, for instance, if you as a chief of staff want to kick off the planning, you have a nice kind of slide template that you can use as a basis. Of course, you can tailor this always to your needs, but this has basically different elements that you might find useful, such as a timeline, context process, or design principles. Exactly. Then we have here, for instance, the timeline view in a nice table displayed in case you need it further. But these boards can also easily be taken out or switched according to your needs. And then this is one of the boards that we also want to dive a bit deeper on later. but basically also gives you, guidance into like, hey, what are actually some of the questions that we should target in those workshops? How can I basically set up the workshops right? You find also different features such as timer, private mode, the voting, like the typical stuff, and some other functions. After you have set the strategy brief, the whole next part is about the OKR. So basically, hey, how can we then go from our strategy brief, the outline, it can be like maybe the one on 6 months or a year, and break it down into the objectives, mainly here in a workshop format. And last but not least, this is also what you want to achieve, basically, the final OKR overview here in a table format. Or if you then say, hey, I need to, put this into slides because we're going to kick off the goals for next fiscal year, then is your slide deck that you can use for all hands, or maybe even send it out async and so on. Okay, so let's go back. And coming back to the board, I want to raise an easy question, which is basically the foundation to everything when it comes to the OKR planning, right? What is our strategy? And I mean, let's be honest, the strategy chaos is real, meaning that, some teams don't even talk about it. Others think they do, but I don't know how many times you have walked out of a meeting thinking, okay, we've clarified the strategy, only to realize that everyone left with a slightly or maybe even totally different version in their head. And I think it's much more common than we actually like to admit. But a lot of times strategy lives in slides or in someone's head, or maybe even in a Slack thread from like 2 months ago. And then it becomes really hard to anchor your OKRs around it. I'm not sure you can relate to this, but that's also why we thought it might be quite nice to spend today's time a bit more around the strategy brainstorm. You have seen this one here. It's part of the blueprint as well. And what we kind of wanted to achieve with this blueprint is really have a few guiding questions that you can use. Of course, you can always tailor them to your specific use cases, to where you are at the moment. But I think overall, they just, kind of like should give you a few guiding questions in case you as the chief of staff are the one that needs to, drive the leadership, align them, maybe lead the workshop and come up with a nice, solid strategy brief. What I also have done here, because we're going to send you this board afterwards, is I came up with a fictive example, which in this case is the Local Vibe startup, a reputation management platform, basically designed for local services and hospitality businesses. And then I filled out this template based on just some input that I created or made up myself. What is very nice is that now, even with AI, we can kind of like create these things literally on the board. So what it does here is kind of, it spits out my Local Vibe strategy brief for FY26 and summarizes everything that we have basically been working on during the workshop. And this all kind of goes with one click, so to say. I will also quickly show you how. Just for context, I have written down my prompt here on the left. And then what is quite nice is I can go to the board, and this feature is basically an action button that I can set up here. And I say, hey, I want to create a strategy brief, right? Then I say create with Miro AI. What do you want to create? I would like to have it in a document form. my source. Here you just basically open this, and as you can see, I kind of like gave the frames names. So I'm gonna collect my brainstorm, which is basically the workshop that I have been run. I can also collect my destination, which is my strategy brief. And then here, of course, you can always play a bit around with like, yeah, how does your prompt look like? And then basically you can create it, iterate it, of course, and then it spits out a nice, yeah, strategy brief, so to say, which I think is a nice basis, especially if you then want to go to the second part, which is, yeah, defining objectives and key results based on your 1 year outlook. Exactly. Do you have any questions here on the demo part?
I think we have the perfect bridge there, actually, to the next part of the demo, Imi, how we draft OKRs.
Yeah. So do we want to do the next demo part, or do we want to do AMA? Because we have 10 minutes left.
Let's spend a few minutes on this as well.
Okay.
And then if people have questions for the AMA, maybe they can already drop them in the chat so we can fire away afterwards.
Nice, cool. Exactly. We were not sure how many questions we have today or time, basically, but this would actually be the next part of the draft. So I put here the strategic plan, right? That is based on the brief that we just had on it, and then basically using the blueprint, coming back to the structure again, we would then basically go into objectives, right? And yeah, I mean, based on the strategy brief, you can again run kind of like your workshops and basically come up with, okay, what could in that case be our O1, right? Like in this one, we literally also followed a bit more the buckets and the structure that we had just shown you on the board. So the first one is all about the key priorities, as in what is our kind of like primary market focus. Here, of course, you can do like, again, workshops, like collect everyone's ideas and then basically come up and summarize them. I, for instance, took this objective in that case, which is establish category leadership in the US F&B reputation space by the end of F26 revenue, right? And this is kind of like the objective we want to achieve. And then how the key result is like, how do we want to get there, right? Like, and how do we actually also measure if we are on the right way? And this then, of course, also depends always a bit on like, yeah, how you define the strategy brief. In our case, or in this fictive example, we basically said, okay, we want a 10 times growth based on the current customer base. So we want to grow from 5,000 to 50,000. We want to reach 10% of market share in the US, and we want to kind of reduce our CAC. I do think that like by prioritizing, which you can do, for instance, easily on the board with dot voting, it's all about setting the focus, right? And also, that's also what kind of like Lotte mentioned. That doesn't mean that the focus cannot change in the next quarter or over the next 6 months. But this is really like one thing where you say, okay, this is like how we see the move, like the needle moving basically into the right direction. And then what is of course also nice, you can just like take that and also display it again in the table, which you can do again in the same way that I just showed you. And then have them all nicely basically, yeah, in the board, on the board, in the different sections. And then what is quite nice, especially for me, since I also do the traction, is I can also, like transform these elements from like a table or a workshop into a presentation or into a table. That's how I need it in this case, and then also start the tracking there, right? I can easily like say, okay, I need a start date for this. I need an assignee for this, and then basically literally track it from here onwards. Nice. Then I think we would open up the session for questions.
Right. Awesome. I'd been typing away a bit in parallel as well already through tag teaming. Should we go with the question of Ted's? When using the W model in strategic planning, how do you make sure there's a balance between cross-functional alignment and accountability? Are OKRs shared across functions, or do teams break them down into their own responsibilities to drive execution? Yeah, so we have the OKRs on the company level shared across the functions, and then we basically have those cross-functional initiatives that drive that work. And then it's actually larger programs that are basically driving the work. So let's say you have the objective of the example I gave earlier, right? Let's say we're focusing on a proposition in Miro for product teams. So we're bringing together the specific use cases for, let's actually say we're focusing on chief of staffs. We're bringing together these blueprints, which is basically our product proposition for chief of staffs. So we need the product teams to line up to it to make sure that the capabilities are there. We need the marketing folks to work closely together with those product teams to make sure the blueprints look presentable, we show the value, we're able to market them in the right way. And then we basically have our marketing team that thinks about, hey, Lotte and Imi, you go do a webinar here, or what are the other ways to basically distribute that content towards you as a specific user of Miro. And then we think about our sales teams, how do we enable them to get in touch more with chief of staff and be able to actually sell Miro to them directly, for example. Does that answer the question?
Just in my experience, when we use the W model, at some point, each of the department has their own goals. And what was within the W, we lost accountability, track of accountability, and everyone was focused on the functional OKRs rather than cross-functional, because it was not directly clear who is taking all of them.
Yes, so I totally agree. So basically, the OKR for us is cross-functional, and the work is also cross-functional. So it's a cross-functional team that's truly driving that work. There will always be some functional work, right? Like the back end of Miro will always be product and engineering work, and like we don't need marketing in it. So some part of that work will always continue to stay truly functional, but a large part of the work is truly set up and driven cross-functionally. So therefore, teams can't only align anymore to like functional OKRs because it doesn't allow you to drive those large end-to-end initiatives.
Thank you.
Jeremy, on your question on track and measuring, there's actually blueprints for that as well. Yes, we'll take a look after. I think they might be linked on the board, but I think there's actually a few more that we can share with everyone as well. We definitely use the RACI framework to define accountability and mapping stakeholder roles. The only thing we often struggle with is like you have usually one DRI that's responsible, which really helps you for accountability. And then we actually often speak about the working team, and those are all the people that are doing the work together. So we've also spoken about a Tracy in the past, where the R is one responsible individual, and then the T is basically the working team or the responsible team that's driving the work. But without having that one DRI that drives the work, we've seen it's very difficult because the accountability is very too spread across the people. I think we have 1 minute left, Clara, so taking a look at you as well.
Yes, thank you so much for handling all of those questions. I was going to help ask them, but you were monitoring the chat so closely that I think we answered most of these questions. So a huge round of applause, please, for Amy and Lotte today. This was so insightful, and I think the demo itself was so incredible as well. So you could actually see Miro in practice. As Amy said, I will be sending out this board to everybody to follow up so that, you know, if you wanted to see any of the frameworks or templates, you will have full access to all of those. And they will also have their LinkedIns on that board as well. So if you want to reach out and connect with them there to learn more about Miro, it will all be accessible via board. But thank you once again to Lotte and Amy. Thank you for coming and sharing all of your insights with our audience here today. And I hope to see all of you at the next one. Have a great Thursday, everyone. Chat soon.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye bye.